Hey guys, we are back at Ghost and Friends, and we are continuing Big 12 week a little bit here, right here. We've got two very special guest members of the Gamblin Gauchos group here, Mr. Rob and Mr. Kyle. Thank y'all very much for being here on the channel. I'm going to get right to it, guys. Tell us a little about Gamblin Gauchos, how you guys got started, just a little of your story, if you don't mind, for our viewers that don't know you, gentlemen.
First of all, appreciate you pronouncing Gauchos right.
There we go.
It seems like such an easy word. I never would have expected people struggling with Gauchos, but there's a member of the Texas Tech team. Let's just call him a front office guy. He says Guachos.
Guacho, okay.
Yeah, there's some Guchos out there and Gauchos. I mean, everywhere you can pronounce it, I've heard it in the last 3 years. Yeah, Kyle and I were Twitter mutuals several years ago, and we kind of had similar senses of humor and thought about football the same way, thought about Texas Tech athletics the same way. You know, I would make a joke on Twitter and then see Kyle had done it 5 minutes earlier or the other way around. And so Kyle slid into my DMs one day. I was already in the media, but he said, hey, man, you want to start a podcast? We met for the first time at a local grocery store diner thing at the front of a grocery store. And the rest is history, man. We started a Twitter account, did a couple episodes. We were fortunate enough to get former Texas Tech quarterback B.J. Simmons on an early episode, and took off from there. It's been a good ride.
Awesome. Kyle, anything you want to add to the story, brother?
That pretty much covers it. We were pretty lucky to hit or catch lightning in a bottle, I think, the first year. I mean, I'm not like relishing anybody's downfall, but we had a football coaching change just a few months after starting the podcast because we launched it for football season that year. So, you know, coaching changes, there's always a lot of fan interest. And then that basketball season was Mark Adams' first as head coach right after the Beard departure. And so, you know, there's a lot of stuff on social media around Chris Beard's return, and I think we were able to capitalize on that a little bit. You know, Sweet 16 run came up a little bit short against Duke. But, yeah, that first year we were able to – I mean, we kind of, I don't know, didn't know what we didn't know. And so we're like, hey, let's see if like B.J. Simmons or Dallas Braden or whoever will come on the podcast. And they kept saying yes, thankfully. But I feel like we got really lucky, you know, because those guys certainly didn't need to share their time with us, but they were gracious enough to do so. So, yeah, you know, I kind of thought, you know, this would be a fun podcast to do with a friend and give me an outlet to talk about some of this, but turned into a, you know, pretty good size audience and, you know, a community of listeners that, you know, we've got a Discord channel with now, and, you know, they meet up with each other on game days, tailgate together. So it's really evolved, and it's been a lot of fun over the last, I guess, 3 years.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely fun to see how it all can develop. And I didn't know that, you know, you guys had only been around for that short of time period. I'd say roughly a year and a half, 2 years ago, I've got a younger brother that I'm down in the New Braunfels area, just south of Austin, and he played football over at a Division III school in Seguin, and we hung out a lot. And he's always kind of pushing me. He's like, man, get into the whole podcasting scene, like do this and do that. And I was very much of like, bro, I'm not going to do it without a co-host. I'm not going to do it without somebody that, you know, I can work with often. And he knows that I wanted to talk more than just Texas football. And so the very first reference that he had for me, or referral that he had, he was like, dude, reach out to Gauchos. He's like, I think they're awesome. And this is, I mean, if according to y'all's timeline, y'all have been around for about a year. And so I had seen you guys, you know, just because back then we could all see everyone's retweets and all that good stuff. And so I saw the content pop up often. And so I gave you a follow, and I was like, man, like, and I told him, I was like, bro, they don't like Texas at all. They're never, ever, ever going to do that. So when you talk about people that, you know, maybe didn't need to give you your time, they gave you your time and being gracious for it. I genuinely feel that way about you guys, because y'all are much further down the line than I am in this whole world. So when y'all did, or whoever did respond to my original DM and said like, yes, you'll do that. I had my phone closed, and so the notification popped up, and I screenshotted it, sent it to my brother, and I was like, funny world, right? And he was like, dude, that's so cool. So you got more than just one Longhorn fan. I'll say that. You guys keep putting up good content. People are going to watch, man. So excited to see where that journey goes for you. Really am. But we're here to talk Red Raiders. I did a prediction show last Friday. I'm curious to see if you guys are as high on Texas Tech as I am this fall. I claimed on the prediction show that I have Tech winning 10 ball games, winning the Big 12 conference, obviously making the college football playoffs along with that. I'll let you guys talk about what your expectations for the team, no in particular order, whoever would like to take that. It doesn't necessarily have to be from a win-loss total. You don't have to go that far down the line. I don't know what all predictions y'all have done, or maybe you have something set up for down the road. But just curious to hear what y'all have to say about the Tech Red Raiders and the expectations in Lubbock.
Rob, where do you want to start on this one?
Go ahead, Kyle. You got it first.
So my sense of things from the fan base is that last year we obviously entered the season with – oh, hang on. Sorry about that. I'm doing my fantasy draft. Do y'all mind if I make a pick real quick?
Bro, you're good.
I'll go first, Kyle.
That's funny.
I do think I got my draft grade. I thought I had a decent draft.
Hold on. Do you need to talk about this? Like,
yeah. Okay. So I've got a good lineup. It's the later rounds here. We're in round 11. I got TJ Hawkinson, but he's going to miss the first 4 to 6 weeks. So I'm thinking I go Dallas Goedert here.
Dallas Goedert still available at that late? Pretty strong.
Yeah, I'll do that. And then it's going to beep again in 2 seconds, and I'll take my backup quarterback, and then we can keep this train rolling.
Oh, you're great, brother.
You want
sorry about that. Okay, so, yes, last season, Texas Tech entered with really expectations for the first time in probably 13, 14 years. And, that came to a screeching halt in Laramie, Wyoming. Rob and I, unfortunately, were there in person to see it. So I'm sure a lot of your listeners will relish the thought of Rob and I sitting in the stands in double overtime when we lost that one. But, so disappointing season last year. Should I go Kirk Cousins or Trevor Lawrence here for backup quarterback?
It's really tough. I'm probably leaning Cousins. I feel like his big game upside is a little higher than Trevor's. It's going to be dependent on a little more better defense in Jacksonville. I don't know. It's tough, though. I mean,
36 coming off Achilles.
Achilles, yeah, that's a good point. Wasn't even considering the Achilles injury.
I fell for Trevor Lawrence last year, and I love making the same mistake twice. So, okay, let's lock that in. Trevor Lawrence. Okay,
there you go.
Really, really sorry about that. Okay, where was I? Okay, yeah, so we fell short of expectations. Really the only time we've had expectations around this program in a decade plus. And so I think a lot of fans are snake bit, and if they're being honest with themselves, if they think we're a 9 or 10 win team, they're going to tell you that we're a 7 or 8 win team just to kind of guard their hearts a little bit, because the last thing they want to see is us struggle in Pullman or, kind of fumble out of the gates in Big 12 play against what's perceived to be one of the lesser teams in the conference like Arizona State or Cincinnati. But, I look at it and think we've had some really bad luck the last 2 years. We've started 3 quarterbacks both of those seasons, made it work a little bit in 22, didn't work so well last year. If we can have a healthy quarterback for 12 games, that alone should probably be +2 in the win column. You look at some other good luck, bad luck factors, some road games against really tough teams. So we were at NC State when they were top 15, at Kansas State when they won the Big 12, at TCU when they went undefeated, made the college football playoff, at Texas last year. That was a buzzsaw. I don't see any road games like that this year where we're just, getting off the bus as 14, 17-point underdogs. So I think the schedule is favorable. And we've done a really good job recruiting. That's probably McGuire's biggest feather in his cap. And by year 3 now, plus with the portal, pretty talented, pretty deep across the board. Everybody has a position group or two that they would like to see a little bit better. But I think they've laid a pretty good foundation. And, I would be a little bit disappointed with 6-7 wins. So I'm hopeful we're more in that 8.5, 9 territory. And if a couple of those one-score games, which I think there's going to be a lot of, go your way, then that's when you can have kind of a special 9, 10+ win season. So the margins are going to be really small in the Big 12 this year. A lot of parity, a lot of depth. 6 or 8 teams, all roughly about equal to each other in my eyes. So you could have a 6-6 team and a 9-3 team that head to head might be a pick 'em, but they just have a ball bounce their way or something, and that's the difference between a good season and a slightly disappointing season. But that's kind of where I'd peg it. I think Vegas has us right around that 8-win total, and that's roughly my expectation. If we exceed that, great. If we underachieve relative to that number, it'll be a little bit disappointing.
I mean, I think you've nailed a lot of it there. If you look back to last year, Tech played a lot of close. Not talking about the Texas game, you played a lot of close ball games. I think you talk about cleaning up a few areas, winning some close games. I think you were 0-4 when turning the ball over 3+ times. One stat that really was intriguing to me was I believe was it 5-1 when giving up 26 or less. And so I think with the defensive scheme that you have with TD, like the aggressive nature. I like that a lot. I mean, honestly, in my opinion, it won y'all the game in 2022 when we came up there. Y'all sent the house on every single play. You risked giving up some big plays that you probably knew you were going to give up inevitably when you have talents like Bijan and Xavier Worthy out there, but you never relented on that. And you you created a lot of negative plays that went along with some of those big plays, but put us behind the chains a lot in the second half. I like the way that he called that game. But yeah, I mean, a little better defense, few less turnovers. I mean, yeah, it's a disappointing season. I kind of fell for the hype last year too. I think I had y'all at 9-3, and so yeah, when y'all lost in Wyoming, I was, it was bittersweet because I was like, man, my Tech pick just went out the window. But at the same time, I do have a little Texas in me. How about you, brother Rob? How you feeling up there?
Yeah, I'm feeling good. I put in an official prediction yesterday at 9-3. And I think it's all due to how the schedule lays out. I think you have a really good opportunity to go 6-1 at home. And I think you have a decent opportunity to win 3 games on the road. You look at the schedule there. So that game in Pullman early, that game at Arizona, at TCU, at Iowa State, and at Oklahoma State. If you can beat Washington State early, which you've struggled on the road early in seasons, but I think that's doable. I think you'll, be a slight underdog or a slight favorite there within 3 either way. Arizona will be a tough one.
Absolutely.
But I'll be really interested to see what they are without Jed Fish. Was it the coach or was it the talent on that roster? Because they retained a lot for a coaching change. And then I think you can win in Fort Worth. You've done it before. I think you can win at Ames, Iowa. You won the last time you were there.
Yeah.
What is Colorado in November? I think that's a big question for that program. So, I mean, if you go 6-1 at home and 3-2 on the road, I mean, that's
your 9 wins. Yeah.
9-3. And so I think that's doable. I think you could also go 7-0 at home. You just look at this home schedule. I think West Virginia is tough, but Texas Tech has been really good in November, aside from that Texas game we keep mentioning, which we don't have to mention again if we don't want to.
More than fair.
And then I think North Texas and ACU are certainly wins. Arizona State and Cincinnati are certainly winnable. And then you just look at Baylor and what they are, and Dave Aranda's in the hot seat, and Colorado and what they were at the end of last year, just a shell of themselves. And then Oklahoma State and West Virginia are going to be the difference between competing for a Big 12 championship and, going to the Pop-Tarts Bowl. So I think you have a pretty good opportunity at the end of the season.
I mean, that's my big thing about my prediction, the 10 wins, the Big 12 title. I know it's going to be madness in the conference. You could very well win it with 9. But I love the schedule for you guys. Like, I think this is awesome. You're talking about no Utah, no K-State. You have the well-placed bye between Colorado and Oklahoma State before you have that big road game in Stillwater. I'm not sure if Oklahoma State has one as well, but I think that's a really, really properly placed bye for you guys. The Arizona game, if I'm looking at this, just I same concerns you have with them. They did lose Jed Fish. We got Coach Nansen from them, a highly regarded linebacker coach. And so, I mean, what do they look like? Yeah, but I mean, I'm fully with you guys. I think that schedule is extremely favorable for Texas Tech. I mean, not like they try to do you any favors or anything. It's just sometimes, teams are up, teams are down, and it just works out really well. You have some of the bigger games at home, and then you have that bye before you go to Stillwater. Speaking on Oklahoma State, a little sidebar real quick. Are y'all buying the Gundy hype again? I know there's a little more hype than there was last year. I felt like it was really, really quiet this time of the year last year for the Cowboys. But
so
what are y'all's thoughts?
Last offseason, Oklahoma State and Mike Gundy, I feel like they had a terrible offseason. Mike Gundy was talking about how he hated the transfer portal. He was talking about how he hated NIL. He was not going to do either of it. He went and hired some no-name D3 defensive coordinator that nobody knew. And everyone was like, this guy's giving up. This guy does not care anymore. He went and got Alan Bowman, who Kyle and I know very well. He was at Texas Tech early in his career. Has a noodle for an arm, makes bad decisions, gets hurt all the time. And heading into last season, it was just like, all right, who is this team? They're not going to be any good. They'll probably win 6 because that's what Gundy does. He'll go to a bowl game every year. They might win 7, but they're just not going to be competitive. And then they went to the Big 12 championship game because that's Mike Gundy. And so you look at a team this year that returns everyone. I think that Oklahoma State defense is going to be really good. And I think offensively, they play in a system that's within themselves. They punt. They don't do crazy things. And if Alan Bowman can be within himself and hand the ball off to Ollie Gordon, and that offensive line can be as good as they were last year, I mean, there's no reason Oklahoma State shouldn't be in the Big 12 championship game this year.
I mean, that's going to be a huge one when y'all get down there in November, in my opinion. With the schedule y'all have, I mean, that could, big-time Big 12 title implications there. Kyle, what about you? How you feeling about the Pokes?
I don't know what to make of them. I didn't think they were going to be any good last year, and when Gundy proved me wrong, I was like, okay, I'll never doubt him again. They returned like nearly every starter, but the market doesn't love them. Like they're not really – I think they're maybe 4th in Big 12 title odds, depending on where you look. Their season win total isn't that high. Really tough home atmosphere. So I think they're going to be a tough out, but I'm always a little bit wary when the market doesn't agree with the perception. Kind of happened in reverse with Tech last year. Fans were convinced we were Big 12 contenders, and the season win total was like 7.5.
7.5. Yeah.
It didn't really deter anybody from thinking we were winning 10. So I'm really not sure what to make of Oklahoma State, to be honest with you.
I think it's pretty up in the air. I mean, they're going to play in a lot of close ball games too in that conference. There's going to be a lot of games that you have to make plays late in the stretch if they're going to win and stop teams down the stretch. That's just part of that conference, man. Like even with the team we had last year, we still played a ton of close games in that conference, and maybe should have lost one or two that we got away with. But you have Ollie Gordon, you have Alan Bowman. Obviously, everybody knows in the conference knows that guy. We'll see what their offensive line looks like, but I think their defense will be pretty solid. That's who I did have, not necessarily because I believe in them, but I just can't doubt Gundy again with all the talent coming back. So that's who I have y'all meeting and beating in the Big 12 championship. But real quick, getting back to Tech for a little bit, talk about the transfer portal. You guys made some really big additions. What I really liked that you guys did was on the offensive line. I don't know any of these names because I didn't write them down. But if y'all care to expand on these pickups, I know that y'all made 3, if I can remember, 3 pretty quality additions that will start on that offensive line.
Yeah, Kyle, you want to start with your buddy Sterling Porsche?
Yeah, Sterling Porsche is going to be the starting left tackle out of Middle Tennessee State.
That's right. The player.
His PFF is terrible. So they must have seen something in him that didn't translate to that PFF grade. So we'll see. He's like one of the biggest wild cards on the team because he plays obviously a very important position.
Right.
The coaches seemingly think he's good. All evidence to this point is that he's not good. So we'll see. Whoever's right on that is going to swing the season one way or the other, I think. Next to him at left guard, we've got Vinny Scurry, transfer from Toledo. He was, an all-MAC kind of guy on a good Toledo squad last year. So he's, I think, probably considered the best lineman on the team. And then at right guard, I think he's still fighting for the 5th and final starting spot is Davion Carter out of Memphis. Really good pass blocker, allowed I think 1 sack and 500+ dropbacks last year at Memphis. Against pretty decent competition there in the American. So we'll see if that can translate. But if he's not a starter, he'll be, I think, your primary backup at any of the 3 interior spots. And I think that's a position group that needs to play a lot better. They've got a new position coach. So yeah, we're rolling the dice on 3 transfers and hoping that at least the majority of those guys are hits.
I mean, with Taj Brooks, I mean, you improve the offensive line play at all. Like that, Baron Morton's job just becomes so much easier, man, because you've added some pieces for him to distribute the ball to. But of course, like you talked about earlier, you have to have the trench play, and if you get protection, you get running lane for Taj. Obviously, that's just more people that defenses have to commit. And yeah, with some of the new targets that you picked up, I'm gonna let Rob talk about those. You picked up a tight end, a couple wide receivers. How you feeling about those additions?
Yeah, so you went and got Jalen Conyers from Arizona State. He's a West Texas kid, originally committed to Oklahoma, went to Oklahoma, then he went to Arizona State. Now he's back in Lubbock, and I think originally he wanted to go to Texas Tech and was under-recruited by the staff at that time. And I think, for so long at Texas Tech, we've been talking about tight ends, and it's just never materialized into production. And I think this year with Mason Tharp, who's 6'9", 260, and Jalen Conyers, and then a kid from Elon, a small school, but a lot of production on his tape. 20 yards per catch. His name's John Carlos Miller. He's a guy that can really stretch the field from the tight end position, and he'll play all over. And then you have Josh Kelly from Washington State. And Josh Kelly is a 1,000-yard receiver, spent time at Fresno State and was productive, went to Washington State last year and was productive with Cam Ward. And so you have a really similar style of offense there at Washington State. So I don't think there's a big learning curve for him to come to Texas Tech. And I really expect this offense to be more dynamic this year. Zach Kitley, the offensive coordinator, this week in a press conference said that year 3s have been really good for him in his career, and I think that's going to be true this year. Baron Morton said he wants to get more vertical, and that's something he just could not do last year with an AC joint injury. Suffered in like his first series of the year. And so I do think that Baron Morton can really get vertical with these additions. You also have Caleb Douglas from Florida, who was not incredibly productive at Florida, but in his time on the field, basically just caught touchdowns. His touchdown to catch ratio is incredible. And so I do think there's an opportunity here for a bunch of guys that are new to be on the field immediately. And that's not even counting, the true freshman 5-star receiver, Micah Hudson. And a transfer you got in last year, Dre McCray, who's kind of the 4th wide receiver who'll be out there when you're in 4 wide. And a true freshman running back who's fighting for the 2nd spot, Cam Dickey. So I think there's a lot of new faces offensively. And I think if Baron Morton is healthy, that's going to turn into a vertical offense that you saw at Western Kentucky with a run game that is powerful because of Taj Brooks. So I think you have a pretty good recipe there with the new faces. It just kind of all has to gel quickly because you've been slow to start seasons under Joey McGuire.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, no excuse for a slow start to the season with that schedule, man. Go win the games you're supposed to. Get ready for Big 12 play. I like Josh Kelly. Is Josh Kelly is that at the X? Where is he playing? I rather should say he's starting over Micah Hudson at the moment, correct?
So on the initial depth chart, Kelly and Coy Aiken are the 2 starters outside.
Okay.
And then Caleb Douglas, who's like your biggest wide receiver, is actually starting inside in front of Micah Hudson.
Okay.
But I think what that means really is when there's 2 wide receivers on the field with the tight ends, Coy and Kelly will be the starters. And then if there's 3 receivers, Caleb Douglas will join them or Micah Hudson. I think those guys will play equal snaps.
I'm a huge fan of the tight end room. I wasn't even thinking about the Elon transfer between Tharp and Conyers. I mean, you can do a lot of things personnel wise with a guy like Kitley. I mean, Sark loves to run 2 tight end sets and do a lot of different things with that and kind of go jumbo at times. And you can go really, really, really big when you have a guy like Mason Tharp and then Conyers, who obviously is a pretty dang good route runner. But curious to see where he does with his career, because I personally wanted that guy really bad out of high school. We were kind of lacking for tight end recruiting at the time, so he was a guy that I was looking to get. But so good luck to him up there in Lubbock. We'll see what he does. Talk to me about the defense a little bit. Is there a certain position group that really stands out to you that you're expecting big things from? And then maybe what's the position group, or if there is one, that you need to see maybe some improvement or a big jump?
I think on defense, the leader in the clubhouse is definitely going to be inside linebacker. You've got a duo there. Ben Roberts was a freshman All-American last year, 100 plus tackles. There's all kinds of stats there on, like, we haven't had a freshman with that many tackles basically as far back as the stats you can find go. Needs to improve in coverage a little bit, but I mean, for a first-year player last year was excellent. And then the guy who missed most of last season was Jacob Rodriguez, the other starting inside linebacker. His per game production, if he's able to do it over 12 games, is going to be first team All Big 12. And so you pair those guys together, you're talking like both of them have first team All Big 12 potential, maybe even more than that. And I think good depth behind them. There's a kid named John Curry, second-year player, a local product from Lubbock, and hasn't played much yet. Got some special teams run last year as a true freshman, but they think really highly of him and think he could be a rotation piece or good depth at that spot. So in terms of strengths on the defense, I think inside linebacker is definitely top of the list. I'm really not – Rob, correct me if I'm wrong. I don't know if there's a close second.
No, not defensively. I would say that's the premier position group defensively for sure.
How do you feel about your safety tandem with CJ Baskerville and Lux? I personally, I'm a pretty big fan on them. You don't think they're close at all to being as strong as a backing group?
So Lux is starting corner.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Chapman Lewis is the other safety. And he's replacing Rabbit, who's with the Cardinals now. The best defensive player you had last year. And I would say –
a great nickname too, by the way.
Yeah, great nickname. I would say in the secondary, you feel really good about Braylon Lux, but the other half of the cornerback tandem is going to be a guy who's not played much, Mo Horn, or Jalen Peoples, another guy who hasn't played much. You feel really good about the star, I think, with the Baylor transfer, A.J. McCarty, who's playing for the first time, set out last year, and another true sophomore, Brendan Jordan, who played a bunch as a true freshman. And then you have at safety Chapman Lewis, who's a second-year player, going to get his first big run as a starter. And then you have CJ Baskerville, who started his season last year as the star and then moved to this position kind of midway through the year, flipped with the guy that was there. And I think toward the end of the season, he really got his job, but I think it was a struggle to go back there at first. I feel really good about the depth in the secondary, but I would just like to see it for a few weeks before I make any kind of big decisions there. The potential is there. And I think recruiting has been so much better in the last 2 or 3 years with Joey McGuire. If it's what it's, been billed as, Chapman Lewis, Jalen Peoples, Mo Horn are all going to be guys that contribute, and you can really start to see the flowers blooming from the recruiting process that you just haven't seen much lately.
I mean, overall, y'all been putting together some nice classes, and obviously last year, the second that you took Micah Hudson, that's when I really woke up to okay, they're doing things up there, and they're fully committed into the whole recruiting game, and probably not the last recruitment that you'll win like that. And Micah did a lot of trolling of Texas fans and on Twitter, man, and he did it really, really well. And that only kind of honestly made me gain respect for him, because he was like, I don't have to take any of this, and I'm going to let y'all know about it. So I am very excited to see Micah over on the offensive side of the ball. But back to defense for just a moment. Pass rushing. Who we looking at? Who we dependent on? I know last year was at times a little bit of an issue, and go right ahead.
Yeah, we don't know. The first depth chart came out Sunday night, and the two starters at the edge spots were not two guys that we knew would be in the rotation, but we did not have them pegged as starters. So that is very much to be determined. I think the opposite. You asked me about the best position of strength on the defense. This is the biggest question mark. Not to say that they'll be the weakest, but just the most uncertain. So there's two guys, Isaac Smith and Joseph Adedire were kind of the starters in the spring, and they're now the primary backup at each edge spot. So the starters are going to be a player named Harvey Dyson, who's I think a redshirt sophomore, has played a little bit as a rotational guy, but not featured very prominently, but apparently has won that job coming out of fall camp. And then on the opposite side, is going to be a young man named Amir Washington, who enters as a redshirt freshman. The only real run we saw him get last year was in the bowl game, and in I think 34 snaps, had like 3 sacks, a couple tackles for loss, a forced fumble. I mean, he was on an absolute tear, but that's just a one-game sample size. So I think people are excited at the prospect of what he could turn into, and if he can maintain any pace even close to that for 10 or 12 games. But I think that'll be a position where they rotate heavily, and even the backups might be getting 40-45% of the snaps there, at least until somebody kind of emerges as someone who can consistently get in the backfield and cause some havoc.
I mean, obviously, pass rushing is just such a big part of the game, and regardless of how end you are on the back or how good you can be on the back end, so quarterbacks are just so good, offenses are just so good, and so definitely have an eye out on that. Unlike most Texas fans, I will fully confess that I watch a good bit of Tech football, a lot more than I do TCU or Baylor. I'll give you credit on that. I do think that Roberts and Rodriguez, that's a pretty strong pairing of backers in the Big 12, probably as good as any that I can think of. To be fair, I'm not completely acclimated with the new Big 12 teams. But yeah, I think there's a lot to like. There's a lot of talent in Lubbock right now. The schedule's great. I mean, obviously you do, like Kyle mentioned, there are a couple of question marks. But it seems like if you get a little bit better in the trenches, that over under, I don't know if you said it was 8 or 8.5, Kyle, but I'd be leaning towards that over. Okay, so Big 12 teams. We'll get off of Tech for just a moment. Let's think outside of them. Give me one team you expect to overperform, and then a team that you expect to underperform as well, if you have one. Not asking you to slander anybody, but if you have it.
Slander. Yeah, we can slander. I'll start with Iowa State. I think Iowa State's a team that can overperform.
Okay.
I don't think they've gotten a lot of love this offseason. But I think, bottom half of the projections, I think even under Texas Tech, they're in the preseason poll, or right around Texas Tech in the preseason poll. But I haven't seen much love for Iowa State. They've got a returning quarterback in Rocco Becht, who was kind of forced into action last year after the gambling scandal broke. You got Abu Samuel at running back, who had like 9 yards a carry in a pretty low amount of carries, but close to 100 carries, and had a ridiculous yards per average or yards per carry average. You've got 2 really good wide receivers and a transfer in from North Dakota State that caught 1,000 yards last year or in his career at North Dakota State. The offensive line is always an issue there with Matt Campbell. I don't know why he can't figure that out. And then they're going to have a top 3 defense. That's just what they do there. So I think Iowa State can overperform. I think they could be in the mix late. I think you could really have games against Iowa State and Oklahoma State on the road with Texas Tech in November of teams that are competing for Big 12 championships. Teams to underperform. That's a great question. I think Kyle would expect me to say a team like West Virginia, because I don't trust Neil Brown, NASCAR Neil, as I call him. He's got all the tools there. He's got all the tools to have a slow, methodical, run game-oriented offense that can wear you down and allow the defense to be rested, and they can play really sound, quality football. And they did that for big stretches last year. And then late against Houston, they went away from it. Late against Texas Tech, they went away from it. Donovan Smith hit a Hail Mary to beat them, and Texas Tech had a pass at the end zone to tie the game or take the lead on the last possession. And a third string tight end that's not even in the program anymore jumped 2 seconds too early and could not catch the ball.
That's
And
really
with
early.
a quarterback with a broken leg and a quarterback with a freshly sprained AC joint. And they were just passing inexplicably up late. And that's what Neil Brown does. So I think if Neil Brown plays within West Virginia and lets Garrett Green be Garrett Green, who I think could be a very good player in the Big 12, and runs the ball with White and Donaldson and trusts Wyatt Milam in that offensive line, I think they can be pretty good. But based on what they did last year and the expectations on them this year, I wouldn't be surprised to see West Virginia go 6-6 just because of what Neil Brown is and how he can't get out of his own way.
There has been a lot of hype around West Virginia these last couple of weeks, and to be honest, I don't really understand it, just for several of the same reasons that you listed. It's hard to trust Neil, and when you're up and have a chance to close out a couple of the games I guess the Houston game, that's the game that really stands out in my mind, because I mean that was a Thursday game or Friday maybe. We all watched that, and the way that they lost that, I mean, it's hard to put a lot of faith in the old Mountaineers. But I really like the Iowa State pick. Matt Campbell's always going to have a terrific defense. They traditionally go about as far as their skill position players go. Their offensive line's never been a big plus, but obviously back when they had Breece Hall and Purdy, I mean, they're pretty strong. And so with all the skill talent you mentioned, I do like that one. Kyle, what do you have? Or who do you have, rather?
I'll pick UCF as an overperformer. I think Gus Malzahn is kind of an underrated, maybe a little bit forgotten about coach in this league, with some skins on the wall at the highest level of the sport. And I think now he's got a perfect quarterback for his system in KJ Jefferson, the Arkansas transfer. I looked up the numbers, something like an 8,000-yard career passer with 1,800 yards rushing as well. Pretty efficient guy, takes care of the ball. I think 3.5 to 1 touchdown to INT ratio. Then they've got RJ Harvey, who in a conference loaded at running back, he's got his own case that he's right up there with the best of them. So I'll take them because I think they may have the best offense in the league. For an underperformer, I'll pick Kansas. Pretty concerned about their depth. I think they've got some great pieces in their starting lineup, but I'm a little concerned if you look back at some of their recruiting. Their high school recruiting class in 2022 had something like 5 guys in it. And those would be third-year players now. And then you think, well, maybe they went really portal heavy in 22 and 23, and they didn't. So I'm a little concerned. Everybody rolls an ankle or gets turf toe or whatever. Are they going to be able to compete when 6 of their starters are out in November? I'm not sure. Obviously, at the forefront of that conversation is Jalen Daniels, a guy who is extremely impressive when he's on the field, but has missed, I think, the majority of his games while in Lawrence. So until we see him for 10-plus games, and even if he's there for 10-plus games, I'm concerned about the rest of their depth. So I think that's a good candidate to maybe sell based on their stock at the beginning of the season.
I like that. To be honest, I'm very partial to Jalen Daniels in Kansas because he ripped our hearts out in 2021, and it became such a big storyline. And obviously everybody in the world had a good laugh at that. And so I was like, you know what? I mean, I don't resent them. I am going to root for him. I hope he goes and does extraordinary things so that it hurts a little bit less that, we gave up 50 plus to KU at home. Tough to say out loud. But, I like that. There's major depth concerns there. And obviously with Jalen, it's like your buddy Gage, he did let's see here, 1 second. Sorry about that. Gage did the old prediction show with me, and where did that comment go? Yeah, either way, there it is. He also had UCF. He had them winning the Big 12. Listed several of the same things. I think KJ is going to be a fantastic player with Gus Malzahn. That's a great pairing. He did great things at Arkansas. You're talking about an Arkansas team that was always at the bottom of the SEC. He is getting absolutely licked, pounded. I mean, all the time. I've watched several of those A&M games, and those guys beat him up. The Bama games. So yeah, hard for him to stay healthy. Hard for him to be his full self. And in a lot of those games, I mean, they're getting ran pretty hard. And so it's curious to see what he looks like with Gus. But I do like that pick. Gage, to be honest, kind of turned me on to that one. And then hearing Kyle say as well, I mean, see what happens over in Orlando. And then, back to Kansas. I want them to do well, but it's hard to see it. And when you're going to have depth, mid to late October and all of November, you're going to play a lot of tight ball games. And there's already been injury history there before with Jalen. I definitely have no qualms with either of your choices. Now, I haven't really done anything like this on the show yet, but I'm definitely happy to do so. You gentlemen have gambling in the name. Is this something that we're doing often? Are you guys talking spreads and whatnot, everything else on the show at times?
Yeah, I will say early on in our tenure, we talked a lot more sports wagering. I feel like we don't do it as much anymore, but certainly during football season, all the picks we make, all the picks we talk about, we discuss the line. We don't ever do straight up picks. So yeah, that's something we pay attention to for sure.
Okay. Well, a couple questions for you then. Let me give me and obviously it's probably going to be pretty right on with what you just said or the choices that you just made. But give me a Big 12 win-loss total that you're really liking over or under on to where you'd put your own dollar on it.
Let me look through them real quick.
Because I mean, my favorite is it's you gentlemen. I'm riding my Big 12 championship pick, and if you're going to win the Big 12 conference, you're going to have to hit that over total. And so we'll just hopefully don't put my bad juju or any type of jinx on you guys. But that's where I would be while you gentlemen look.
Yeah, I'm a little worried you're engaging in some like subtle reverse psychology or black magic with. I've never heard a Texas fan this high on tech before.
Now listen, I know we're just new to each other, but me and A&M, the Aggies, we have a great rapport for whatever reason. There's a few of them in here now. And I said back in March, I was like, it's crazy or something that the A&M baseball team is going to win the College World Series. And I was like, it was borderline impossible that they don't. They're that. And I meant it. But then, of course, everyone took it as me just clowning around. And so, no, I'm really not. If it works out the same way, and at least there's a dumb video of me predicting you guys to win 10 games. So it's not really black magic. It's I mean it for now.
All right, I will take the over on Iowa State. I think that lines up with my thought earlier that they'll overperform.
What's that number at?
7.5.
7.5.
7.5. I might trail Kyle's Kansas thought here. Their total is 8. And they've got
that's tough
at Illinois, which could be tough early. That's their one non-con game that I would be worried about. They go to West Virginia. Man, their road schedule actually is pretty easy. Interesting. They do play in Manhattan, but they don't play at home at all this year. They play in a soccer stadium early in the year, and then they play at Arrowhead the rest of the year. So I'll be interested to see what that looks like. Because they're not going to fill out Arrowhead. I mean, that's a big NFL stadium. So if they get their customary, 40,000 football fans at a game, is it going to feel empty? Is it going to? Is it going to be loud? That'll be interesting to see. Kyle, do you have any that you are looking at?
I hate to say it, but I think I don't know. It feels like 5 years ago that Sonny Dykes and TCU were 12-0 and about to play for a national championship. Obviously had a disappointing season last year, but that's a fast and severe fall from grace where they're picked basically like right in the middle of the conference. So I don't know what their win total is, probably like 6.5, 7.5.
7.5.
Yeah, 7.5 tops. Yeah.
They still probably have one of the more talented, deeper rosters in this league with a coach who, was National Coach of the Year a couple of years ago. I think that's a good over candidate. I don't have their schedule in front of me. Maybe they've got, maybe they go to Utah and Tucson and all this stuff. I don't know, but and then I think Baylor kind of woke up a little bit. It seemed like they were just asleep at the wheel last year. Didn't win a single FBS home game, and just feels like they're not going to stay down that much for another entire season. And kind of during this whole run with Rule and Aranda, they've been like elite one year, fall off a cliff the next year, elite the next year. So I know Rob is a big proponent of the due theory. They feel like they're a team that's due for kind of a breakout season. So as much as I hate to say it, kind of the two in-state rivals for Tech, I think are both probably primed to go over their current season win total.
What about Utah,
like-
9.5?
Now they're still playing Baylor early in the year, right? Then the non-conference.
Yeah, they have a non-con game against
Conference.
Baylor in Utah, but that game at
Hey.
last year was ugly.
Ugly. And Baylor got a lot better at quarterback, or I think they've got a lot better at quarterback, but that'll come down to their O-line. I mean, if Baylor's O-line, I like it, Kyle. If they improve O-line, I think Aranda with a lot of the pieces they have returning on defense, they should be okay. Better than they were last year by a good margin. Kind of hard not to. I don't remember that one of the worst Baylor teams in a little while, but Utah, I'd really lean under on that, to be honest. I'm not convinced that Cam Rising's going to be 100%, and this is obviously before we get into game reps, So I don't know. That might just be me. Y'all might think they're going 11-1. I have no idea, but if I had to pick a side there,
I'm out on Utah. I'm out on Cam Rising.
there we go. He had an elite commitment post to Texas, and so I was like, yeah, I'm always going to root for the guy, but it's kind of worn off now because that was like 8 years ago. But
literally,
it's been a while for him. Yeah, that was like the beginning of the Tom Herman era, so he's had a ride. But and then K-State. I mean, I think K-State's got a pretty tough schedule there. They've got a little 4 or 5 game stretch that I think is pretty difficult in the middle of that schedule. They get Colorado a little bit earlier than you guys. I'm trying to remember who all that's lumped in with there, but it's I want to say games maybe 4 through 8 for them, maybe even like 3 through 7. But you got like Tulane for them in week 2. I don't know. We're not here to talk about K-State, but I do think that a lot of people I think are assuming that Utah will be one of the Big 12 champion participants, and then a lot what I've seen at least is K-State would be behind that. But how do y'all feel about Kansas State and Coach Kleiman up there?
Not to put too fine a point on it, but I'm not sure their quarterback can throw the ball. And maybe they don't need to. I saw him run for 5 touchdowns in Lubbock last year, but that offensive coordinator is gone. They have an offensive lineman who's going to start for the Dallas Cowboys this year, who they should probably put in their ring of honor. He's gone. Their all-conference tight end, Ben Sinnott, is gone. So I don't know. I'm not convinced that they're going to be an elite rushing team like they were under Colin Klein with both Adrian Martinez and Avery Johnson. And Will Howard maybe less of a running threat in between. But I don't know. Like, I've been told when he's on the field, he's the fastest guy on the field, and maybe that's true. But if he completes 55% of his passes, or if it's at a higher rate than that, but they can't push it down the field at all, I don't know if that's going to be sustainable without, that Colin Klein run offense. Their co-offensive coordinator, who I think is calling the plays, is a guy that Tech fans are familiar with. Matt Wells was our head coach, Joey McGuire's predecessor. Pretty good career as an offensive coordinator at Utah State, and had some good offenses when he was head coach there. But I don't know, man. After seeing that for 2.5 years in Lubbock, I would not be willing to be super confident in him leading that offense. And again, until Avery Johnson can show me something with his arm, I'm just not totally sold on it. It's not to say it can't happen or that they won't be really good. They certainly could be, but I'm skeptical.
So I was doing some research the other day because we have been working with the assumption that Matt Wells was going to call plays, but it looks like on their roster, the coaches are listed as I think his name's Connor Riley, the offensive line coach. is listed as offensive coordinator, and then Matt Wells is listed as the co-offensive coordinator. So I would assume Riley will call the plays. If it was Garrett Riley, or Lincoln Riley, I would be very nervous about State. But this guy, first year calling plays. Last year he called in the bowl game, I think, after Colin Klein left. But I'll echo Kyle's sentiments about Avery Johnson. We saw some highlights that they were putting out in the offseason, and they were lauding his leadership because he was missing passes so bad and calling his receivers back over to try again. And they were like, oh, this is a real leader. It's like he missed a 3-yard out by 6 feet. And it's leadership because he called him over to do it again? Like, come on. I don't know. But he did run for 5 touchdowns against Texas Tech. So there's not much like trash talk I can say because he was pretty successful at that.
I mean, he didn't throw for 5 touchdowns versus Texas Tech. He ran for 5. So I think it's a fair question that you and Kyle both have. You both said it's not that he can't do it. It's just that you need to see it. And, that's more than fair.
So, his sample size throwing the ball last year is pretty minuscule. It was 56% on 66 attempts. But within the same game, he only had 10 or more attempts twice. He had 10 attempts at versus TCU, completed 50% of them. And in the bowl game, when Will Howard announced he was hitting the portal, he played every snap of that game. They threw the ball 31 times. He only completed 14 of them for 45%. So, I don't know. He's got some games in here where he went 3 for 4, 5 for 6, but not proving it like over the course of 60 minutes, week in and week out. And the one time he was given that opportunity, I know it's a small sample size, it didn't go that well. Amazing athlete, but I just don't know if I'm hitching my wagon to any quarterback that I'm not extremely confident can complete more than half of his passes.
It makes complete sense. And then you're talking about an offense that you mentioned earlier, lost Ben Sinnott, the biggest weapon as far as for Avery and Will Howard. I know that Avery wasn't getting the most run there. It was all Will, or mostly Will. And then you obviously referenced the big O lineman who's, could go down as one of the best in K-State history, if not the best. And so, yeah, there's definitely question marks with K-State. The offense, how do they look? Who is Avery Johnson's go-to guy? I do love the backfield. What is it, Giddens and Dylan Edwards? Like that is really strong. But at the same time, it's Big 12. It's big time for college football, and you have some excellent coaches that are going to be able to stop the run game if that's all you're able to do. We'll see what all that offense looks like. It's definitely. I've just trying to make my point. I was curious to hear what you guys had to say about Kansas State because I'm just not sold on K-State and Utah the way that I feel like most people are. So. Appreciate you guys chiming in on that. Now we'll go over and I know I got the season prediction from you, Rob. Kyle, did you give me a season total, or did you give me a prediction for you guys? Did you have one?
I think I've been at 9-3 when I.
All right.
If I don't say 15-0, I think I usually say 9-3. So I'll say 9-3.
I'm hoping this 9, and you don't have to divulge anymore, but I'm hoping that your 9-3 is kind of the 9-3 you were referencing from earlier, where it's the scared pick, and that really, your expectations are up here with me because I don't know, man, y'all kind of made me feel crazy there for a second. Like I picked y'all to win 10 games. It's doable. I watched y'all win 10 games before. I do have a painful question for me to ask you, gentlemen. But what were you doing? Where were you at when Michael Crabtree beat Texas?
I was in a basement in South Lubbock watching on a giant television screen.
We should have traded places. I was at the Jones, and it was pretty miserable, to be honest. Kyle?
I've got 2 takes on this, and they both might surprise you a little bit. So I was born and raised in Austin. Neither one of my parents went to college, and my best friend since kindergarten, his mom was like, Texas X has lifelong season tickets that she got from her parents who were lifelong season ticket holders. So when I was in kindergarten and made this friend, it was Ricky Williams' Heisman season. So I was going to the games. I saw Ricky Williams' Heisman parade from like the age of 5. And so I was a Texas fan growing up in Austin. So that Crabtree game, I think it was my sophomore year of high school. Didn't know where I was going to school yet. So I was actually rooting for Texas during that game, and like couldn't believe it when it happened live. I was like, well, surely he stepped out or something, and like we'll at least get a field goal attempt here. And of course, there's that iconic image, like that shot right down the sideline, and you're like, holy cow, he somehow stayed in bounds during that whole deal. So yeah, I was watching with some friends, just like upstairs at somebody's house, and it was wild. We had a friend who was drumming in the band at Tech, and we were of course like trying to find him on TV and stuff when they're panning to the crowd. But my second take on this is that it was almost 16 years ago now, and I think in a lot of ways we haven't moved on, and that's a little bit of an unhealthy. It's an amazing play. It's an iconic play, and we still see replays of the Zach Thomas pick six against A&M. All that. But and maybe it's because we haven't had like a signature moment since then, but I would love to create one. And again, iconic play. It'll live in Texas Tech lore forever, but it would be nice to also like have another chapter after that we could celebrate just as much.
Yeah, it's not as cool to show the Jakeem Grant Little People Big World also against Texas, but yeah. I don't think Texas went to a bowl game that year, and I just don't think that is as I guess doesn't burn into the zeitgeist quite like Crabtree did.
Yeah, I mean, like the biggest moment since then was like, an Alamo Bowl win over Kirk Cousins and the Holiday Bowl win over, a top 15 Arizona State team. But, it just doesn't move the needle as much as, Harold and Crabtree, like two of your probably 10 best players in program history, hooking up on what was basically the last play of the game, the last play from scrimmage to beat your top rival, who was ranked number one at the time. But I don't know, like if we can win the Big 12 or go to a New Year's Six game. Like I said, I'd love to have a new chapter that we can turn the page to. And because I don't know, I don't want to be 50 years old and like that still be the most recent highlight that they play on the Jumbotron, like before the game or something to hype everybody up. Like having to tell my grandkids, like, oh yeah, one time we beat Texas, and like since then we haven't done anything. So anyway, I get why they want to hold tight to that play and that highlight, but. Yeah, it'd be nice to be able to move on a little bit too.
I definitely want to share my experience at the Jones that night because it was a pretty wild time. But I'm with you, man. That is our Vince Young on 4th and 5 clip, and we didn't really have we won the Big 12 in 2009. We won some ugly football games. We beat Oklahoma 16-13. We beat Nebraska 12-10 or 13-12, whatever it was, and I mean, there's highlights, but there wasn't crazy ones, and so and plus obviously we lose to Natty, but I mean, you see it replayed so many times in the off season, and and then we get to the whole countdown thing, and it's like 11 days, 10 days. Here's Vince Young running again, and it's almost 20 years later. Like, let's find, and now obviously that day is specific to number 10, but yeah, I'm the same way with you, man. We're going to the games in 2017, and you're still seeing that clip of Vince run, which they should always show that, but we got to have some stuff posted after that. We need some material for post that, and so I'm with you on that. But going back to Crabtree, I know that obviously it's forever ago, but we had a buddy and or obviously a classmate that went to Tech, and he offered us to sit for free in the student section, and we were like, no, man, like I have the Longhorn tattooed over my body. Like I wasn't going to go into Lubbock and just sit in there and act like a Red Raider. Like it's impossible. 18 at the time. And so me and another buddy, we drive up with a buddy's dad, and he was so worried about us going up to Lubbock by ourselves from East Texas. He's like, hey, listen, my brother lives in Levelland. We'll go up there. I'll go hang out with him, and I'll come pick y'all up after the game, and we'll drive home. Like a 7-hour haul, man. Kickoff's at 7:00, right? And so I'm just like, and we don't care. We just want to get to Lubbock and watch the football game. So we're like, yeah, absolutely, let's go. And so we obviously get all the way up there, and now I'm getting separate tickets from that same Tech student over there, I think in like section 22. It's kind of like in the corner of the end zone, I want to say, or it used to be. I don't know if it changed with the remodel. And we have no phone service whatsoever. And our buddy's dad has already dropped us off. And I'm talking like 3 or 4 hours. Like we're there at like 1:00, and we can't get a call to go through, a message to go through, nothing. until 5:30. And luckily for us, he was still standing in line, the student line, like trying to get in and everything. So we were able to link up and get our tickets. But then during the game, obviously it's madness. We're 18-year-olds at a road environment, college football. Who knows what we were saying? But there's definitely things being said back to us. But I'm not going to act like we were innocent in this situation. So don't make it like that, please. But at halftime, we walked down, and there's a couple guys that are just like really razzing us kind of hard. And this guy wearing a burnt orange jacket and a cowboy hat walks up, and he's like, "These are kids. Like, y'all leave these kids alone." And like they're not doing anything wrong, man. They're just literally razzing us, and we're giving it right back. He's like, "This game's not over. Y'all just wait. Y'all just wait." I think it was 22-6 at half or something. So yeah, we go in, we get a hot dog, come back up, watch the second half, and Texas obviously takes the lead very late on I think a Fozzie Whitaker touchdown run, and he's sitting directly to our left, probably about 40 seats over, and we look over and he just tips his cap, and like he felt like so big in that moment. We're kind of like in awe. We were like, okay, this guy just kind of told us how it was all going to play out, and he had our backs a little bit. And then the Crabtree play happens, and I look over, and Buddy has flung the cowboy hat. I mean, he probably threw it, I mean, a good 30 yards. It was really impressive. I mean, you're talking about some West Texas wind. It's late Saturday night. I mean, he flung it. It took off. It was just a crazy scene, man. People obviously are going crazy. We had the students and the band all to the right, and just pandemonium, man. And so as soon as that happened, we were like, okay, let's get downstairs. Let's get out of here. As fast as we can, just because we know people are going to rush the field and everything. And so we get to the edge of the steps, and then we start. Y'all have already rushed the field, and so this is, I think, the part where we have like 7 or 8 penalty flags. It felt like it went on forever and ever, and it almost felt like y'all were kicking off, past midfield. I think y'all were like right there at least, and so we were like, well, now we're close enough to where like there could be a chance, and so we had to stay and watch that. And we get out of there, and it's November 1st, so the day after Halloween, and we're all worried that someone's going to say something. Just hey, not trying to make Tech fans to be out to be bad guys. Everybody has fans, and we were just 18-year-old kids that were scared, to be honest, because we were in a place we didn't know. And this guy comes up, tons of students in Halloween costumes and whatnot. And this guy comes up, and he's in a big gorilla costume. I mean, he had to be a 6'3", 6'4" guy. I'm tiny. And he comes and puts his arm around me, and he was like, "What a night of college football, man. That was so cool." And I was just like, all right, man. And after that, like, we talked to these kids all, the whole way home or to the car and everything. And then we're in hell. We're going through it all, but my buddy's dad doesn't care one way or the other. So the first thing he says when we get in the car, he was like, "What a great game." And we're just like, half crying. I'm wearing like the Colt McCoy the Longhorn eye black strips. Like, just, that's probably why I was getting shit talked to me. I mean, I deserved that. But yeah, man, it was rough. And then we drove 8 or 7.5 hours, whatever, back to East Texas, and had to wake up and then, act like you didn't care about the game that had just been played out in front of you and was your entire life for 4 hours the next day. So good times.
I also think y'all should have gotten in over OU. I still don't understand, in a 3-way tie where like Texas and OU were pretty well separated from Tech in the final standings, how you don't take the team with the double-digit win on a neutral field. I think Texas was the only, in that 3-way tie, the only one to beat one of the other 3 at a neutral or road environment. Can y'all hear my house just like imploding in the background?
I heard one little like scratch or scuffle or something.
I think it just fell down, but we're fine here in the podcast studio, so I'm just going to keep rolling. Okay. But yeah, I know that OU finished obviously with a blowout of Tech, but that still doesn't make any sense to me that Texas wasn't picked to win that tiebreaker over OU.
I think they scored something like 60 plus 5 times or something, or maybe 4 times late in the season. Like they scored 60 plus on Oklahoma State, on A&M, on Tech, and there was one more team in there that just bodied. But no, I mean, obviously I'm with you. We beat them by 10 on a neutral field. The only thing that I'll say is, obviously, I guess it's somewhat early in the season, second week of October. I love my Longhorns. I'm a big Texas fan. There was a massive injury that happened in the third or late in the second quarter of that game. Ryan Lewis went down for Oklahoma, was just a stud at linebacker. And so part of me is like, hey, I think I'm coping right here by saying like, hey, if that guy was in the game, we wouldn't have been able to run the ball the way that we did somewhat in the second half, and we might not have held on, and therefore would have lost, and then therefore the Tech game wouldn't have hurt us bad. I'm a sicko. Okay, so I'm just trying to find a way to cope with myself when I say that, but I definitely, with the 45-35 win, it is what it is. Then you watch Florida beat the same team by 10 points, and it gets pretty frustrating. I mean, we kind of shut Oklahoma down pretty big after the big first quarter they had against us that year. And so, sometimes defenses just adjust. So they did put up 35 points, but I could talk about that all day, man. That was a great season. I was rooting so hard the week after y'all beat us in Lubbock because Oklahoma State came to Lubbock, right? Oh my God, dude. I was Zach Robinson and Kendall Hunter. I was just praying. I was like, please, we need the tiebreaker. And like, we need you guys so bad. And obviously, if that would have happened, then it doesn't matter if Oklahoma or Tech win, we would have still got in. And so.
And we were just talking about that on our last episode, how good the Big 12 South was that year, that you have that three-way tie, 3-11-1 teams. But Oklahoma State I think they finished 16th, but they were flirting with top 10 at points in that season. And I guess they lost all three of Texas, OU, and Tech. Yeah, obviously they did. But, man, had they been in like any other division in college football that year, who knows what they could have been. And then the Heisman voting, 4 of the top 5 players were from 3 teams in the same division of college football.
That's absurd.
And then the 5th was Tim Tebow, like this legendary college football figure. So the division was just absolute. I mean, people talk about the SEC West in a certain way, and I guess there's no divisions anymore. But at least that one season, the Big 12 South was just like absolutely loaded.
I mean, we got Oklahoma, who was number 1 at the time. And the same way that we played Oklahoma, you had number 2 Missouri playing like I think Oklahoma State was like 11 or 13, somewhere in there, in which Oklahoma State went on the road and beat Missouri and Columbia. And so like I was all excited because we had beat Oklahoma, and then that Missouri OSU game was a night game, and I was like, dude, we're about to have number 1 versus number 2 at DKR next week. Like this is going to be a scene. And yeah, so they lose that one and drop to like I want to say 10 or 11. So we played number 1 Oklahoma, number 10ish Missouri, 7 Oklahoma State, and number 6 Texas Tech in a 4-week span. And like it was really, really cool, man. I went to every single game, and I remember living and dying on every single play. And it truly did feel like, you guys know ball, like you're getting up big time for that type of environment, that type of game, and do it that many weeks in a row is really difficult. And so I was very, very hesitant about our chances on going to Lubbock. I mean, like, yeah, we had fared very well when the whole Mac Brown versus Mike Lee little eras, but it just, something was different about that Tech team, man. I think the first time I really, really saw it was the way that y'all went up and just absolutely handled Kansas and Lawrence. I mean, y'all bodied them. I mean, I want to say y'all scored 60 plus, maybe 70. And I was like, okay, that's another game of the gauntlet. It's not just a 3-game gauntlet. It's a true 4-gamer here.
What a season.
Yeah, good times, man. Good times. I was asked earlier today, I did a little pregame with a Colorado State individual, and he asked if I could go back to the old Big 12, if I would do so, and in a heartbeat, man. I don't know about you guys, but I would be all back into the Nebraska, K-State, Colorado, Mizzou, A&M, all back with our Texas schools. And that conference was a lot of fun. And I know a lot of it towards the end got sideways and really, really silly, but I can't pretend like my school didn't play a part in that. So we won't go too far into that, but
Small part.
Is there a percentage of you, a small part, that will miss Texas and Oklahoma?
Not really Oklahoma, no.
Hey, you don't have to be nice to us just because it's my channel. You know what I mean?
No, I will miss Texas. I really enjoyed playing Texas. You didn't beat them often, but when you did, it was a big deal. That's in football. I mean, you kind of dog walked them for a decade, or at least 10-game stretch there in basketball.
Yeah.
And then baseball, I think, was really competitive in the last 5-6 years. Obviously not the whole time Texas in the Big 12. Texas is a really good baseball program, and you've kind of just started in 2014. But I will miss Texas. Those were really fun atmospheres. Kyle and I were at the Kurt Wilson Steal of Home series. That was awesome. At the Chris Beard return game there in Lubbock, that was awesome. That'll always be one of my memories. A lot of those games against Texas, the Allen Bowman horns down game, where Texas comes back in the last 2 minutes of the game with a sky kick and a dumbass call from Matt Wells. Yeah, a lot of the good memories are losses, but they're good memories anyways. And I think it was a great rivalry, even though a lot of Texas fans don't agree. But we were talking about it before the podcast. I think Texas fans being so vehemently against it being called a rivalry made it more of a rivalry.
Well said.
I guess there are parts I'll miss, parts I won't miss. I'm glad that Yormark is the commissioner now. I think Bob Bowlesby more or less served at the pleasure of DeLoss Dodds and I guess was collecting a $10 million annual salary to pretty much just I was going to use some choice language, but make sure Texas was comfortable, and that was to the detriment of the other 8 schools. I remember vividly when Baylor and TCU were teams 5 and 6 that first year of the playoff, and it was like, hey, why don't we have a conference championship game? BYU was sitting there the whole time. I thought they were always a Power 5 caliber conference. Louisville was there, and we took TCU instead. That never made sense to me. So like that part I won't miss. I would say, honestly, in terms of fan interactions with Texas fans, you're like top 2 and probably not number 2. And so I've always appreciated you and your account for that. What I won't miss is every time Tech beat Texas, whether it's football, basketball, just the immediate and predictable, like, well, let's flock to Twitter and say every mean thing we can possibly say about Lubbock and West Texas and academics and football games that were played in the 1940s. And that part was not terribly enjoyable. Thankfully, it wasn't a rivalry, and Texas fans don't care unless you beat them, and then they want to talk about like the 82 football games you've played against them and your all-time record there. I think we need a pause, kind of in the same vein as that Crabtree highlight. I think when Texas is on the schedule, it sucks all the oxygen out of the rest of the games. And, I want this to be a football program that plays for a Big 12 title, that plays in a New Year's Six bowl game with a 12-team playoff. I mean, that's a threshold. I don't know if a 4-team playoff was ever really feasible for Tech, but with 12 teams and some auto bids, I think that is feasible. So I don't know. I'd be fine for like a 5-year cooling off period, and then I would love to play in the non-con on equal terms, home and home. And maybe that would be. I think it would actually be a better non-con game than conference game, because the new Big 12 I think has so much parity, and you don't have a Texas or OU that has so many more resources, so many more built-in advantages than all the other schools competing for the conference title. So I think I will enjoy that aspect, but like I'm not going to lie to you and say that playing Cincinnati or UCF is the same as playing A&M, Texas, Nebraska, OU. So yeah, you kind of miss some of those like traditional historic rivalries that at least go back to the 90s, which is pretty much my entire life. But yeah, I'm fine with a cooling off period, and then I would love to resume some kind of like non-con series. I think it makes good sense for just fans of sports in the state of Texas. Like, I don't know if other Texas fans will deny this, but like, hopefully y'all would enjoy playing Tech in football more than Kentucky or Mississippi State, and would enjoy playing us in basketball more than I don't know, South Carolina or whoever. And don't get me wrong, there's some cool SEC matchups waiting for y'all, like Arkansas, A&M. That's all fine and dandy, but yeah, I mean, I think it'd be fun from like a Tech fan's perspective to have one of Texas or A&M on the schedule in football. So yeah, I'm fine with the cooling off period. We're doing okay in terms of TV revenue. We would have more if Texas and OU had stayed, but I don't know. I don't know if the juice was worth the squeeze in terms of how the conference operated with 2 schools that were obviously placated more than everybody else involved. And so it'll be I don't know. I think nice, and I'm at least curious to see what things look like where everybody's on equal footing, and you don't have one or two schools calling the shots for everybody else in the Big 12.
I mean, that's completely fair. I think I don't think that's any type of secret or anything that anyone doesn't already assume or already believe. I think at times it's very clear and evident that certain schools were treated a certain way and favored at times for sure. And we'll just leave it at that. But I will absolutely miss playing Tech. I know that I might be not one of the few. I know there are others, but a big percentage of people, I feel like they really wanted to move away from that game for some reason, and I think they looked at that 2022 game after y'all beat us up there, and then there was a silly incident on the field with the player and a student or a fan, and they just don't realize, like, I mean, things like that happen every time a field is rushed. Almost everywhere you go. And I'm not justifying or saying that's okay. Obviously we need to prioritize safety and things like that, but I was just really surprised to see the reaction because we were about to stop playing Tech, and everybody was so ready to do so. And I mean, I love that game. I love the rivalry. I think it's cool. And, we've got red and black coming into the stands, and you bring your band over, and then we go up there and it's burnt orange, and we've got our bands. And I mean, it's Texas Tech and it's Texas. And I don't know. I feel like, we kind of vibe with you guys a little bit more than we would with, like College Station and Texas A&M. And so I've kind of always appreciated it, but I definitely appreciate the kind words, Kyle. I definitely love Texas. And 10 years ago, you probably wouldn't have wanted to talk any type of football with me. I was a bit of a jackass. And hey, Charlie Strong, Tom Herman, and a 5-7 year one under Steve Sarkisian will humble you a little bit really quickly. And so when I was growing up, Mac Brown was my coach when I was 10 years old, and then he didn't roll out of town until many, many years later, and he won a heck of a lot of ball games. And so I was definitely an arrogant little punk that needed that humbling. But then also as you grow as a person, you start to appreciate and realize some of the other traditions and some of the other ways that people do things are cool in their own self. And so, yeah, man, with a lot of Tech friends and stuff, I've always tried to be honest and transparent with my Tech thoughts. And I definitely, maybe last year was a little too nice. I was sipping that Kool-Aid pretty hard. I think I had y'all going 9-3, and people were like, bro, they're not beating North Carolina State. And I had them winning that game. But yeah, so I definitely appreciate the interactions. I definitely thank you guys for joining me and doing this. Would love to have you back on. Do y'all have any other questions or topics that you might have for me or that you'd like to bring up?
Scale of 1 to 10, what's the level of concern for Quinn Ewers in terms of – now I know it's Texas and y'all can reload, but no Jonathan Brooks, no Jatavian Sanders, no Xavier Worthy, no Adonai Mitchell. Any concern that like maybe his level of play or his overall production was inflated by that much NFL talent surrounding him last year?
Definitely. I mean, like I'm more of a half glass empty than half full type of guy. So sometimes I'm prone to give the pessimistic answers, but absolutely, man. I do have concerns. There was times last year where the play was very inconsistent. And when you're talking about the first three names you referenced between Adonai, JT, and Worthy being gone, I mean, obviously those are all main targets in the pass game. And a guy like Jatavion Sanders is a guy you can do a lot of things with if you're Steve Sarkisian in offense as far as scheme and play calling goes. And so, yeah, man, I stay up late thinking about what our offense will look like, to be honest with you. I'm very, very curious. Now I do adore Sark, and I think he is one of the better offensive minds in all of the game. Not many argue there, but he does have a big job to do. He has a short rotation the last few years at wide receiver, and now we've got a bunch of bodies in there, and it'll be curious to see how he operates. My biggest thing with Quinn is he's going to have to use his legs a little bit more now, considering the running back situation that we're in. We lose two of the top four on the depth chart. I was really, really high on Christian Clark, the freshman, and Jaden Blue and Trey Wisner. Not that Jaden Blue is a small back, but he's not as big as Cedric Baxter was. And so he was going to be more of that hammer guy for us. And so, yeah, man, I have plenty of concerns. I really do. I know that there's a lot of sunshine pumping going on, a lot of, hey, they're going to win 10 or 11 games. And I'm not going to say that that can't happen at all. There's definitely a lot of avenues that can lead to there, but I do have issues, or not issues rather, but big concerns about how it looks. I don't think it'll look anywhere near the way it did last year. So I guess, what would that put me at? An 8.
Okay.
7.5 and 8. Yeah.
Fair enough.
Anything from you, Rob?
You said it all, Coach.
All right, guys. Well, once again, thank y'all for doing this. I'll let you enjoy the rest of your evenings. Thank you guys for checking in. Y'all, if y'all don't mind, go follow Gamblin Gauchos on everything. We've got almost 300 in here on the live. Check them out. I know they're on Instagram, Twitter. I think y'all are on Instagram, right? Pretty sure. Okay. Yeah. I'm about to say, I've seen y'all around everywhere I go. Every time I make an account, y'all are one of the suggested follows. So y'all check them out, guys. And also, if you're watching this on Twitter and like what you've heard, want to see some more guests, more college prospects come on, we've got some of those lined up. Please hop in the link of my Twitter bio, and it'll take you right here to this channel. Like this video, show some love to the Gamblin Gauchos crew. Go give them a subscribe on YouTube, and then do the same for Ghost and Friends. We're trying to get it going. I got a lot of things, a lot of content planned for the football season. But once again, guys, thank y'all for being here and doing this. Hope to do it again, and best of luck to your Red Raiders. I genuinely mean that.
Thank you. Thanks for having us on, and hopefully you're manifesting a great season for us.
There you go, man. We'll speak it into existence for you guys. Thank y'all.
Appreciate it.